Hi friends, my name is Emily. Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, I make bookish videos. I am currently doing a slightly more academic series on the Harry Potter series called Lumos, Illuminating Harry Potter. I will link it up above. That has sparked this how I annotate video. So I'm going to talk today about how I annotate, the supplies that I use, because I do get a lot of questions about that, what I'm looking for, and why. So if that interests you, stick around and check out the bird's eye view that I'm about to show you. Okay, so I think the first thing that I want to start out with is annotation. I annotate in pen, and I annotate in permanent pen. I did have one of those friction erasable pens for a while, but they disappear with heat, and so I left a book of mine in the car with the sun in the summer, and it heated up and a lot of my notes started to fade. So ever since that, I have just used pen. I also find that pencil fades over time, and I want to be able to return back to my notes. So I usually pick one color to annotate in, so the next time I read, I can annotate in a different color. I tend to prefer to use blue because it stands out from the black ink of the text. I also always have with me Post-it notes in various colors. I actually don't like the brand name Post-it notes. I find that they stick either too well and they end up ripping the paper if you want to take them off, or you get a bad batch and the glue doesn't stick at all. My preferred Post-it notes are, I think I'm out of them right now. They're the Walmart Post-it notes. So with whatever I'm reading, I will tend to pick one Post-it note because I'm on Instagram now. I didn't used to do this, but now I'm on Instagram and I'm taking pictures, so I tend to match the Post-it notes to the cover of the book because I'm an asshat like that. I will either stick the Post-it notes to the front cover, or I will stick the Post-it notes to the bookmark that I'm using. You might look at this and go, Emily, these are different sizes. Yes, the flag is too little space, this is too much space, so I take these Post-it notes and I cut them in half. And I mention that because I have had folks ask me where I get these half-size Post-it notes, and I just take I think this is a 2 by 2 inch or a 3 by 3 inch Post-it note. I just take that and I rip a couple off, I cut them in half, and then I stick them to my bookmark or into the front of the book. Those are the supplies that I prefer. So what I'm looking for with each book is different. Like what I was looking for when I read The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater is completely different from what I was looking for when I read Chamber of Secrets a few weeks ago, and it's completely different from what I'm looking for in Night Shift currently. I usually have a research question or a general theme that I am looking for. So with The Raven Boys, I was reading this while I was working on my dissertation, which happened to be on representations of women in fantasy literature. How is the performance of gender happening in literature? So I took notes in pink. This was my first read through the pink notes. Wherever details about gender happened. Some of them are a little bit deviant, but for the most part, they were things that were related to the female characters doing actions, how they are performing their gender, how they are interacting with the men. I usually put little square brackets around whatever passage I'm looking at. If it were to continue on to the next page, I would be looking for that bracket so that I know, like, that is the whole thing that I want to look at and analyze or cite. I will underline and highlight, and usually I add comments as well. This says, refused to be indebted to Gansey, wants to pay for her share. So we see that Blue is a very proud, independent woman. Even though Gansey has tons of money and she isn't wealthy, she does not want to have a man take care of her. She pays for her own food, right? Blue insisted on paying for all of her own food, which limited where they could eat. But she despised when any of the boys tried to buy food for her. Gender roles were on my mind when I was reading this book, and so gender is sort of what I ended up focusing on as I took notes. The second time I read, I was into fairy tales. The yellow notes are a reread, and it says, given my current fairy tale reading, Gossip from the Woods, it's cool that the woods here are magic, mysterious, out of sync with time. So I've referenced another work that I'm reading and how that impacts my rereading of this passage, how it's different this time from last time. It's kind of cool to be able to get back into my own head. Like right now I'm looking at the notes that I made for myself in, I believe yellow is 2018, yes. So I read this for the first time in 2016 and the yellow post-it notes are my 2018 reread. And so I can see what I was interested in at different points in time and sort of, I think it's almost like the experience of reading a book for the first time because I can see my initial reactions and my initial predictions because I've made note of them in the text. And so it's kind of like a snapshot into my past as much as it is me engaging with the text while I'm reading it. So Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets is something that I am currently working on, actually. I did this during the reading vlog. I made notes, things that I am interested in. Here I have food. What Dudley wants, his parents provide, right? They provide him with food and love. And so that was a theme that I talked about in the earlier videos, in the earlier book. I am also looking for, because my two video topics for this book are ethnic cleansing, essentially, like the wizard blood purity. So I was making notes where that appears, and then also I'm looking at the Gothic. So whenever Gothic elements show up in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, I was making note of that as well. So this is an example of a piece that I am teaching. I am essentially writing 2 essays, 2 video scripts on, and so what I'm going to do with this, I haven't done it yet, but what I'm going to do with this is I have a separate notebook. After I'm done making all of these notes, I go through and I note the page numbers and the quotations that I've really highlighted that apply to what I'm interested in. I don't do this for every book, just the books that I am working on something with. What is this useful for? If you are writing an essay, then you have all of your proofs, all your points all together. There's nothing more frustrating to me after years of writing academic essays than when you know that you have the perfect quote to prove your point, but you cannot remember where you read it, where it is in the text. It results in you like flipping around, wasting time. So because I've done this for years, I tend to know what I'm interested in, and so I'm making those notes. Or if I have a research topic, like with this Lumos project, I have my research questions. I know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the Gothic, and I'm looking for elements of wizard blood purity. So I know what I want to keep track of. If you are working on things for school, I mean, this is useful for video making as well, but if you're looking for things for school, if you're in school, you're writing essays, keeping track of these things is very useful. 10 out of 10 would recommend. And if you cannot, write in your books. So you'll notice that I write in my books. My books are mine. They have my brain in them. I view these books as an extension of me. I am very hesitant to lend them out, especially once I have written in them. That's fine. I work at a bookstore. I have a discount. I set aside money for this. But if you don't have the space, you don't have the funds to buy books, you can do exactly what I'm doing without actually writing in the books, right? Like you can take just the post-it note and like line up the post-it note with the top of the quotation. You could even start with like the first word. If I am interested in he missed the castle with its secret passageway and ghosts, right? I could put the sticky in here and start with he missed ... and ghosts, right? And then write my note on this post-it note so I know where I'm starting and where I'm ending and like my little thought, right? And you can stick these into the library book or your school book. Still, especially if it's a library book and you're doing a lot of research, you can write all of these out so that you have them for the future if this has to go back or if you're borrowing it, you know? So you have all the quotations you need, you have the page numbers so you can cite it. Always keep track of your page numbers. Just do it. Know where it is coming from. If you're reading articles, cite them in full. There is a human who was in the same English department as me during my MA thesis who was working on a PhD, built his whole dissertation around this single quotation. Didn't start out being important, it was a throwaway line, but somewhere along the lines it became super important, and they couldn't locate that quotation to cite it. It was one of those things that they were always like, yeah, I'll find it. And then it resulted in, you cannot pass if you cannot find and cite this quotation. Save yourself the panic. Save yourself the accusations of plagiarism. I mean, 1, never plagiarize. Don't do it. We can tell. And 2, cite everything. Even if it's a shitty source, cite it. I think I would rather have somebody admit that they pulled like half of their research from Wikipedia than lie or like plagiarize by omission because they didn't cite it. So cite it. Cite everything. Why should I annotate? If I'm not in school, I don't teach English, I don't make videos, why annotate? And so the number one reason for me is that it slows me down and allows me to actually engage with the text. I spent 5 years doing reading heavy degrees. I am one of those weirdos who actually did all of the readings. I know most people just lie and said they did the readings. I actually did all of the readings. Not sure I would recommend it. I also didn't really make any friends because I spent so much time doing the work, but we all make our choices. It's not what I would do again. I did all the readings, and so I learned to read really quickly. I learned to read multiple things at once and like prioritize. There were a lot of like useful skills that I developed, but most people don't have to do that and they just read at a pace that feels natural to them. My natural pace has been fast for so long. It has been so fast, and I find that if I read for fun, without a pen in hand, without sticky notes in hand, I can read it in a couple of hours and I could be completely engrossed in a story and then it's gone. Like I read the To All the Boys I Loved trilogy by Jenny Han in under 48 hours. That's 3 books. I didn't make any notes in them. And to be honest with you, it's only been like a month and I can't tell you the nitty-gritty details in the way that I can tell you a lot of like more important details about the things that I actually annotate, because it slows me down. It forces me to stop. It forces me to read and reread sentences and like make notes of things that I don't understand in a way that if I was just skimming, and I think that's what it is, I have learned to read so fast that I am not reading all of the words, if that makes sense. If I have a pen in hand and I find something that sits weird or I don't understand or stands out or subverts a trope or does something new and exciting or is a beautiful turn of phrase, I stop and I engage with it. I underline it. I circle the words that are like really powerful and noteworthy, and I think about what those words mean. Sometimes I don't know what a word means, and so I look it up. Look it up in the OED, the Oxford English Dictionary. It has like the history of that word, the etymology of the word. You can see where it comes from. You can see what it implies, and all of this like juicy goodness that's baked into word choice that you, or I at least, wouldn't get if I didn't stop and actually think about what I'm reading. This is gonna make for a really interesting video because I'm a hand talker and now all you get to see is my hands. I think this is probably one of my most prized possessions. It is a book that I have reread multiple times. So this is Swing Low a Life by Miriam Taves. She is a Canadian Mennonite author who has a lot of trauma in her family. Her father died by suicide, her sister died by suicide, and she has worked through that trauma in various works of fiction. This book has so much of my brain in it. Like the first time I read it was for class and I was making notes, and then the second time I was writing an essay. So the pink is all of my reread, and you can almost see me having like a conversation with myself, pulling out different things from like a larger quotation, getting more specific. This book is virtually unreadable. Anybody else probably wouldn't actually enjoy this book because so much of me and my thoughts are in here. Like, all of a sudden here I've made a connection back to page 81. I'll do that sometimes. I'll group things together by page number. So like, now I'm going back. And what did I say on 81, right? Like, freedom. Freedom is what I'm centering on here. Feeling more alive, walking away. I've made all of these connections for myself, and I feel like this is valuable to me. I don't know if anyone else would enjoy reading this because so much of me is in it. I mean, I'd like to think that one day when I'm dead that there are folks in my life who would be interested to read. Like, if I have children, that when they pick up these books, they would get a better insight into me as a human because I have put so much of myself into my books. I've sort of co-opted a lot of these books in that they become very personal once I've annotated them, which I think is kind of cool. Now, when I was originally planning this video, I had planned to film myself annotating, or I didn't plan to film, I did film myself annotating A Scandal in Bohemia. The footage was unusable. I actually had to move a lot of furniture to do this here today. There's footage of me reading out this whole story, making notes and talking about what I was interested in. Let me know if you would like to see that sort of annotation, like a top-down, I'll do it with a short story or an article. My intention was, with A Scandal in Bohemia, was to film myself live annotating it and post the full thing to my patrons and cut together bits and pieces for YouTube. I annotate because I mean, I have to. It's been sort of drilled in at this point after years of being an academic, after having a desire to continue in the academic space. I would love to go back and do my PhD at some point. It's a habit that I developed in school. It's a habit I developed for school, but it has trickled over into my personal reading because I find I read slower. I engage with the text better. I'm looking for things that I'm interested in. I'm making note of it so that I can pull these things together for myself. Like, it's fun making connections for myself, but it's also great to make connections for videos, to pull things out. My passion, I guess, really lies with the more educational content, which is maybe not so good for the health of the channel, but whatever, I'm gonna do what makes me happy. I don't know, it's important. It's important for making connections and really engaging with what I'm doing. So that's why I annotate. There is ways to do this if you don't own the books. You can also do this digitally. I don't enjoy e-reading to begin with because the type of reading I feel like we've been conditioned to do digitally is like a quickie, skimmy type reading. It's just, I think, the nature of how we engage with screens, or at least how I engage with screens, and that's not really how you engage with a piece, right? You don't skim an article to really understand the argument, right? I also find annotating on e-readers difficult. I have yet to find an e-reader that really facilitates making notes. Like, I think it's super cool, the idea of being able to like click on a book and go to all of the notes that you've made for that book. So behind that. That's basically the device doing what I do by hand in this notebook automatically. Like, just with a click of a button, I can have all my notes gathered. Love that idea. I find the act of like finger typing on a keyboard hard. I tend to make less notes when I e-read, and it like, I just don't like it. I'm old. I'm old school. I like a physical book. Yep. I guess I don't have to justify myself. If you enjoy e-reading, go right ahead. That is how I annotate. That is why I annotate. Thank you all so much for watching. Do let me know if you want to see a live annotation in the comments down below. Thank you to my patrons for choosing this topic. There's a tier of my patrons that has voting power, and they are choosing which video I make each month. Links to the Patreon page will be on the screen and in the description box down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye. P.S. What happens to the books that I don't want once I've annotated them. Sometimes I don't annotate a book. There are certain books that especially books for like a book club or something that like somebody else has asked me to read, that I won't annotate because I have a feeling that I'm not gonna like it and I'm going to want to get rid of it. I sort of know myself as a reader at this point. If I'm reading something and I really don't like it, I will probably never reread it, and I have made notes in it. There is the option of just like giving it to a bookstore. If they want to sell it, they can sell it. If not, I am not opposed to recycling a book, which might upset folks, but it is industry standard to do things called strip covers, especially with mass markets, for example. They're even designed for a strip cover. There's the barcode in the front that you will not find in the front of most paperback books. It is cheaper to give credit and just send back the cover of a book than it is to ship the whole book back and try and find a buyer for a mass market paperback or for certain paperbacks. After 4 years of working in a bookstore and stripping the covers off of books, I am really not opposed to recycling something that I've annotated. Like if I have annotated the crap out of it, sometimes I start responding to a book as I'm annotating it. I'm like, this is why this doesn't work. This is the problem with this. Like I start pulling things apart, and like anybody who reads it is probably not gonna enjoy my annotations. It's maybe like a book sin, but it's also industry standard and you just kind of get used to it. I will say that it doesn't happen very often. I, at this point, know what I like and what I don't like. I have either gone into it knowing that this isn't a book I should annotate until I've read it once, or I love it and I know I'm gonna love it. I know that I'm going to want to annotate it and I start annotating it. Like it's just a gut feeling at this point. So, but that's just what happens with the oddballs that I don't like. That's your little bonus after the credits. Okay, bye!